Okay, so welcome everyone to the eLounge. This is a live session and as well as a recording. So if you're watching this as a recording, we hope that you're seeing this information that we have in front of you right now. Our first thing that we are talking about is I want to take a moment for the Office of Civility and Community Standards here on campus to remind everyone that if you have not registered to vote, you need to register to vote. This is one of our big voting years, and voter registration ends on October 11th, so we're running out of time. Make sure that you kind of put some of these dates in your calendars and know that this is how you register yourself to vote. So make sure that you do that. And also, next week on September 26th, on Monday, we are having a debate watch that is going to be happening live via Twitter. So again, this is a really important time for our country and for our political decisions, so we want to make sure that our students are exercising their rights to vote and for civility. So please make sure that you get this on your calendar as well. So with that being said, that is my advertisements for today. And our next portion is going to be talking on credit cards and student loan debt, how to manage that and be successful with your finances. We have Lindsay Partridge here with us today, and she is part of the financial aid office here at the TW campus. And so without further ado, Lindsay, I want to send it over to you.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about credit card debt and some student loan issues. These are two of the things that my students come in and have the most questions about, so we're going to go over some general information about them, just some tips and tricks so you can keep in mind whenever you are dealing with this in the future or currently. All right, something to think about. The typical consumer has approximately $19,000 in personal debt, including credit cards, student loans, and other debt. The average household has an income of $38,653, and this is as of 2010. And if you think about that, that is quite a bit of the average household's take-home pay. So you really have to be conscious of how you're spending your debt, how you are taking care of it, and how you're tackling all of those payments that you have to deal with. So when you're thinking about your financial goals, you need to be smart. You need to have specific goals. They need to be measurable goals. You can't just have a very general set of what you would like. It needs to be quantifiable. They need to be attainable goals. You can't shoot for the moon, unfortunately. You can try, but you need to make sure that you're setting attainable goals for yourself, little steps here and there. Realistic goals. Be realistic with what you're shooting for. Tangible goals. You need to make sure that everything is accessible to you and achievable. We've got some people joining in, which is great. All right. Organizational skills in tackling your debt is paramount, okay? You need to know where your financial information is being sent. Is it being sent to your email? Is it being sent to your post box? Is it being sent back home? If maybe you're living in Denton, but you have your permanent address as your parents' address, you know, do you want all that financial information sent there? You need to make sure that you're keeping important items. You're not throwing it away. You're not throwing it in the trash bin or the recycling bin. You need to keep that stuff and organize it, okay? Statements. Do you have your paper statements or do you get your statements online? You know, I personally get all of mine online because I never clear out my inbox. So I can, anytime I need all of my, credit card statements, I can just go to my search engine on my Gmail account, look it all up, and they're all right there for me. I definitely know that I do better electronically versus on paper, so you have to figure out which one works best for you. Create a personalized filing system. A milk crate with dividers, if that works great for you, you do that. For me, I have an Excel spreadsheet. That's something that I have found is the only way I can keep my life organized. Some people need hard copies. Just whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be like everybody else, okay? All those filing systems on Pinterest might be great, but maybe it doesn't work out for you. And you have to really be dedicated to making the commitment to giving yourself financial freedom, okay? It definitely takes a while. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. You have to dedicate basically the rest of your life to keeping yourself organized and getting all of your documentation in a place where you can access it easily and keep it safe. We're going to talk a little bit about student loan debt. The most important thing to remember whenever you're, frustrated looking at your student loans, at your servicer, and how much you owe, you have to remember why you have student loans. You have student loans so you can go to school, so you can get your degree, so you can further your education and hopefully land yourself a job that'll help you pay those back in a quick amount of time, okay? The most important thing for your student loan debt is to know the amount and the terms of your loans. If you have subsidized and unsubsidized loans, of course, that information is generally available at www.nslds.edu.gov, that website down at the bottom. That is going to give you access to how much you owe in loans and how much interest has accrued on them since your loans were dispersed, in addition to who your servicer is. Your servicer is a person who actually owns your loans. TW lends you the loans, but we do not collect payment on them. You need to contact, or you need to visit nslds.edu.gov to find out who actually owns your loans. And something to remember is that you could have multiple servicers for every single loan. There's, several out there. Typically, students have the same servicer, but especially if you go from school to school, you may have different servicers, or if there was a gap between your years, you're more likely to have a different servicer at that point. Make sure you keep your contact information updated with your servicer and through studentloans.gov, okay? That way they can get, the latest update information to you. They can let you know if it's time to renew your repayment plan, because of course there's several repayment plans available. And if you don't know that it's time for you to renew your payment plan, well, they're going to start asking for that full payment right away. And there's a big difference between a income-based repayment plan and just a standard repayment plan, sometimes several $100s. So you need to make sure that they have the latest up-to-date contact information on you, okay? Because if they can't contact you, they're going to start contacting your references that you put down. So if you don't want your parents bugged about stuff, make sure you keep it up to date. And then, of course, you need to think about your post-graduation decisions. Are you going to consolidate your loans? Are you going to ask for a deferment? Are you going to seek out forgiveness for your loans? One of the most popular programs is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Definitely look that up if you're looking at going into some kind of public service. Even if you work at a university, you can qualify for Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Of course, you want to talk to your servicer about this. If you come into the financial aid office, I'll have a fair amount of information to give you. I can give you websites, I can give you information about that and the actual form itself, but I can't give you specifics about your loans. Your servicer is going to have that information. But again, just seek out Public Service Loan Forgiveness. And something to keep in mind is there are a lot of spam articles out there about this. Oh, if you contact us, we're going to get you, we're going to get those loans forgiven. Well, you always want to seek out websites that end in .gov, okay, because those are going to be the governmental websites for the most part. Studentloans.gov, FSAID.gov, stuff like that, okay, NSLDS.edu.gov. Those are the important ones, okay? All right, credit card debt. This is something that a lot of people struggle with, and of course I struggled with it myself. You have to think about, why do you have this debt, okay? Be honest with yourself. If that debt is mostly, you went out to eat, or you went out to have a good time, or you went shopping on it, maybe you need to work on your spending habits, okay? What is the right number of credit cards to have? Now, this answer varies wildly depending on who you're talking to. They typically recommend anywhere, I believe it's the general statement is 3 to 4 credit cards, okay? And then you only have 1 that you use and the others are for emergencies. The right number is, usually something less than 6. Almost nobody needs 6 credit cards. Now, of course, there are different credit cards, like store cards and stuff like that. But as long as you're keeping your spending constrained, then you'll be okay? You don't want to try to keep balances on every single one of them. You need to know the debt amount, how much you owe, and then what your credit limit is and how much credit you have available, okay? What your interest rate is. If you have one that's a super high interest rate, you need to pay that one off first. And what your due dates are, of course. Now, my credit cards are scattered throughout the month, but I pay them all on the same day. That way it's easier for me. I know, okay, the 7th, all my credit cards are getting paid on that day. Of course, I'm lucky enough to have worked this out with my credit card company. So if yours are scattered like mine, you maybe want to talk to them if one statement isn't done until the 8th or something like that. Sometimes the credit company can move it around a little bit. Of course, it depends on the company that you're talking to. Something to think about is that the little things that can add up, especially when you're using credit cards, because remember, there's generally interest being charged on that kind of stuff. If you get Starbucks every single day, which is something that I struggle with on a personal, especially now that we have a Starbucks on campus, it adds up, it adds up. Look at that cafe latte, getting it. You get one every single day, that is $912 a year, okay? That's a lot. Fast food, that is a concession that I made personally. I really enjoy a cold brew from Starbucks. So in order to keep myself caffeinated through the day, I do make that concession. I allow myself to get that, but I bring my lunch every single day. Do I want to eat the little sandwich with a sad piece of cheese every single day? Well, no, but I'm caffeinated and I'm happier that way. So you have to think about concessions, okay? Whatever works for you. Not all of my advice is going to be applicable to you, okay? But you've got to figure out what works for you. I cannot emphasize that enough. Vending machines are a really surprising credit card sucker, okay? That bottle of chips, that bag of chips is $1. You can probably get a bigger bag of chips for $1 just by bringing it from a grocery store. Bottled water, okay, 24-count of bottled water can sometimes be up to $10. But if you get a reusable bottle, and at TW we are lucky enough to have the filtered water fountains that are great, that bottled water, that refillable bottle is only going to cost you, $10. I got mine for something like $5 from Walmart, and it's lasted me, and it's huge. It's huge. It's 54 ounces. So that's great. You just got to look for that kind of stuff, okay? Now, the next steps. This is some of the most important stuff. When you've kind of got your debt situation figured out and okay, here's where I stand. Here's all of my credit card debt laid out in front of me, which can be, slightly frightening. But I always recommend that. I always want you to write it down, look at it so you know the full picture, okay? You have to practice active management, which is part of that looking at everything laid out in front of you. Active management, a lot of people, they just try to ignore their credit cards or they just pay the minimum. They don't really know what's going on in their account. You need to take an active role in this because if you take a passive role, guess what? You're going to max out those cards and then your interest is just going to start accumulating, okay? That's how things spiral out of control. If you take an active hand in your debt management, you can usually get yourself out of debt a little bit quicker, and at least you're not surprised. Because when people are surprised, that's the worst, okay? Generally, a good tip is to pay off your highest interest rate first. Know your interest rates. Keep all that written down somewhere. You need that highest interest rate is just accumulating. So try to pay that one off first. Paying your bills on time, every time. I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but you would be surprised how many students I see that come in, well, I need more financial aid because I'm, super in debt. Now I have $300 worth of late fees. Well, okay, but, if you got a big refund, maybe that should have gone towards some of that, helped you pay off some of that stuff. So instead of putting yourself further in debt, pay your bills on time, every time. Stay on top of your budget. Make sure that you have a budget, okay? We do a session, a financial literacy session on budgeting, and I personally love budgeting. So if you ever have any questions specifically about budgeting, keep an eye out for those sessions that we have here at TWU. Create a budget that works for you. Remember my Excel sheet that I was talking about? It is a simple little Excel sheet, but it keeps me on top of my budget. I know exactly how much is going towards my bills every single month, and I always start working on it for the next month about halfway through the month before. Okay, so by September 15th, I had my October budget set up. But again, that's what works for me. Maybe you need to budget out 3 months in advance. Just figure it out, okay? Whatever works for you. Research your purchases. If you're making a big purchase, you don't want to just buy the first one that pops up, okay? I bought a new TV because my old one was broken. So I researched and researched and researched, and maybe I went a little too long without a TV, but you know what? I finally got a great deal on one, and because I took the time to dedicate to researching it. And then, of course, I knew I needed to pay off that big purchase all at once, so I tracked my purchases. I know what I'm buying. I know I needed to cut other places so I could pay for that big purchase that I wanted. Try to make larger payments, okay? Because if you just pay the minimum, and generally on most credit card sites it'll say, if you pay the minimum, here's how long it'll take to pay off. Sometimes it can be 10 years plus just to pay it off, and that is if you don't ever use that card ever again. So try to make larger payments when you can, okay? The next thing is keeping your oldest credit card. The reason this is a good tip is because that actually goes into your credit history and your credit report. The longer that you've had credit, the better your score is. It's kind of weird because, when you're young, you just started out your credit report, and it's weird that it can kind of negatively affect it. But it can. It absolutely can. So keep that oldest credit card open. And, of course, work to pay down your debt. And then make and stick to a plan. It's very important that you stick to a plan, okay? You can't, you spend all this time setting up this great budget and everything's wonderful, and then you just forget it about 2 weeks into it. We've all done that. That's okay. But just know you need to get onto it and stick to it. Especially the older you get, the more you want to do with your life. You want to buy a car, you want to buy a house. Well, you can't do all those things if you don't have a plan and you don't stick to it. So that is some of the most important tips I can give you on managing your debt. And the most important thing that if you learned nothing else today, just learn this. Please live within your means, okay? Don't spend this refund that you got from financial aid in 2 weeks, because that money is supposed to last you an entire semester. If you only make $25,000 a year, don't spend $50,000 a year, because just because you have credit cards doesn't mean that you actually have that money available to you. What happens when those minimums jump from $25 to $150 because all of a sudden you have $5,000 in debt on a credit card? That company's not going to feel bad for you. They're going to want their money, okay? So if you take nothing away from this presentation, just take this. Please live within your means, okay? And that's pretty much it for me. If you have any questions, I know I saw one, so let's see. All right, where is that question from Mel? There it is. Okay. What if my lowest interest rate debts are the lowest balance? Do you still recommend paying off the highest interest first? Generally, yes. Okay. If you only have, say your lowest interest rate card is $100, and you can easily pay that off, and it would put your mind at ease, maybe you do want to go ahead and pay that off. Okay. You want to pay the highest interest rate first, Ashley, because the interest is accumulating so quickly. All of a sudden, if you have a $1,500 balance with a certain APR, it can quickly become an $1,800 balance. So you want to try to put the most amount on those highest interest rates. Now, like I said, if you have a card that, just nagging you at the back of your head, and if you only have $150 on there, maybe just to make yourself feel a little bit better so you can focus on paying those highest interest rate cards off, you can go ahead and pay that off. But those high interest cards, those can really kill you, okay? And usually a lot of store cards like Walmart cards or Macy's cards, Victoria's Secret cards, those cards typically have a really, really, really high interest rate. Cards from basically anything that's not like a Discover or a Visa, stuff like that, those proprietary cards, those are typically going to have the highest interest rate. So note those. And then, yeah, do we have any other questions?
Hey, Lindsay, we do have one other question. Yolanda wants to know, what is consolidation when it comes to your student loans?
Consolidating basically means that you're, it's kind of difficult to explain. Consolidation just means that you're consolidating your loans. You're basically turning them all into one loan, usually with, it can be lower, it can be a higher interest rate, but you only have one payment versus, 15 smaller payments that you have to make to all these different companies. And typically for public service loan forgiveness, you'll have to consolidate all of your loans into one loan. That's something that you really want to talk to your servicer about, because they can talk to you about the actual specifics of the consolidation. And if you're specifically interested in consolidating your loans for public service loan forgiveness, like I was talking about, look at fedloans.gov. Just Google it, FedLoans, and they'll have quite a bit of information on there, okay? And then Ashley, is it best to pay over the minimum if you can't pay the full balance? Yes. Generally, especially students, you won't be able to pay the full balance on your card, but you don't have to, but it is always best to pay over the minimum. On months where maybe I can't quite afford as much as I want to pay on my credit card, a little trick that I have to make myself feel a little bit better is to round it off. So if my statement is $557.13, and my minimum is only $25, I'll pay $57.25, because then it's a nice even number. So that's just something that makes me feel a little bit better on months where I can't afford to pay either the full balance or a higher minimum. Ashley, is it best to choose the loan forgiveness for student loans so that the payment should be lower? It really depends on your situation. So with public service loan forgiveness, you have to make 120 qualifying payments over 10 years. So you can't make, those payments within you can't make 2 payments a month within 5 years, okay? So if on your standard repayment plan, you're going to pay off those loans in 3 years, maybe public service loan forgiveness isn't for you. So you have to take all of those factors into your situation, okay? But if you have a high amount of student loan debt and you're on a lower base repayment plan, for example, income-based repayment or pay-as-you-earn, maybe paying over 10 years, if you were going to be paying over 25 years, public service loan forgiveness would be great for you. Credit unions, let's see, Charmaine. Let's see, what are the other questions? Does it count if you apply but have paid for 4 years prior? Typically, you would have to talk to your servicer about that. Regarding public service loan forgiveness, they'll have to see if they qualify, but it's qualifying payments. So they typically will come in and let you know if those payments qualify. I don't know what goes into a qualifying payment. That's a good question for your servicer. Charmaine, credit unions typically do have cheaper interest rates. You may be able to get a better interest rate from a credit union or something like that. However, you need to ask about their repayment terms, okay? Repayment terms are very important to ask about, because if they're going to expect you to pay $300 a month, but you have a slightly better interest rate, well, maybe that could hurt you in the future. Generally, your federal loans will have better repayment terms. So again, look at the full situation of any loan that you're looking at taking out, okay? And then credit unions, credit cards are usually pretty good too. So you may just want to seek out if you're part of a credit union. So do we have any other questions? Y'all are asking fabulous questions. They're really great.
I have one question, Lindsay. Do you happen to know maybe the average amount of student loans upon graduation for a bachelor's degree? And if so, do you have any tips to keep that number low?
Well, a lot of things. I don't have the average amount on hand, But something to keep in mind about your loans is that maybe you don't need everything that you're given in a semester. You can always lower the loan amount. You know, of course, if you have living expenses and stuff like that, maybe you do need to take out the full amount. But always budget ahead of time. Budget before the semester. Okay, here's how much my rent is going to be. Here's how much I plan on spending on food every single month. And maybe you take out an extra $200 just to, you know, for books and stuff like that, or for surprise expenses. And it's really easy to, you know, be offered all of this money, and the prospect of having a $3,000 refund is great, but maybe you don't need all of that money, or maybe you bank all of that money. We have several students who just bank all that stuff. You know, maybe they use it for their summer semesters and stuff like that. And then, or they make a bulk payment at the end of their college career, which is great. All of a sudden they went from, you know, $25,000 in debt to now they only have $15,000 because they saved all that extra money. Or try to take out your subsidized loans first versus your unsubsidized. Try to save the unsub for later on in your career. Of course, if you have, you know, those living expenses like you talked about, and we all do. I had to take out several loans when I was in school because I, you know, didn't get any help from my parents and stuff like that. So sometimes it's inevitable, but do your best to try and limit the amount that you can take out, okay? And then Ashley, is it better to pay on your student loan while in school? That's a very personal decision. Some students really do choose to pay the interest on their unsubsidized loans because, remember, unsubsidized loans have interest accruing while you're in school or enrolled at least half time. So a lot of students do choose to at least pay that off. It's fairly minimal. Usually, I think I was one of those students who chose to do that when I was in school, and I paid, you know, maybe $30 a year or something like that. It just made me feel a little bit better. It made me feel like I was making an effort, even though it was a very small effort, but it still made me feel nice. Some students do choose to work during the summer and pay as much as they can on their loans that they previously accrued during the year. So that may be something that works for you. It's really whichever you prefer. If it makes you feel better, you go for it. If you can't do it, you're taking classes during summer, don't feel bad. A lot of students can only afford to think about them once they actually graduate. So, anything else?
I'm not seeing any other questions, Lindsay, but thank you so much. I think this is a very informative session, and I think these students got a lot out of it. I know I did personally. So, everybody, if you would like to be entered to win a prize from the TW Care office, please submit your TW email into the chat box. And also, keep in touch with us. Keep checking your email so that you can be aware of when the next eLounge is and what our topic will be to come. Everybody, thank you for joining us. If you have any last-second questions, feel free to type them in the chat box very quickly. And again, this session is recorded, and the link will be on the home page at twcommuter.com. So thank you, Lindsay, again, and thank you to all of our participants. Y'all have a good rest of your day.